I did food tech and hospitality for my HSC, and I think it became clear to most of my class that I would be a chef and that I loved it. And it was sort of that just acknowledged thing. Julie's obsessed with this and she's going to be a chef.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. The industry is full of couples and duos who combine their skills and professional nous to create top-shelf dining experiences, but there are a few that have had the impact and influence of the Nilands over the last 5 to 10 years. We've had fish fiend Josh Niland on the show a few times, and it is with great pleasure that today we finally hear from the other half of this dynamic duo. Julie Niland is the co-owner of St. Peter, the Grand National, and Fish Butchery. Julie, how are you?
Hi, good, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. It is great to get you on the show. You guys have got so much on, and I didn't even touch the surface in the intro there, but how are things at the moment?
Good. They're busy. The kids are back at school, which is great, so I can actually get some work done. Yeah, we finally got the hotel open, so we're good.
That was a really big sort of moment, taking over a landmark venue like the Grand National and moving St. Peter. Tell us about that process. How challenging was that?
It was a long time coming, which I think was actually a blessing in disguise. We met George, the landlord, 6 years ago. So my third child was a newborn at the time. I can remember holding her and chatting to him in the old Grand Nash. He did a tour and he said, you know, I've bought this building. I'm going to redevelop it. I'd love you guys to do the restaurant. And we were keen. And it was, you know, going to be in 18 months' time or something like that. And, you know, we had COVID. We had that year when it didn't stop raining, variety of factors. So it was delayed 5 years in terms of the restaurant opening. So we had a bit of a journey in that time in terms of we opened Charcoal Fish, we did Fish Butchery Waterloo, we did Peterman, which was good, all good experience in terms of doing something so big. And then the hotel, it was delayed again. We got the restaurant open first, and then the hotel finally opened 6 months after the restaurant early this year.
Restaurants are sort of yours and Josh's sort of skill set over your careers. What was it like sort of being involved in the hotel aspect as well, the accommodation?
It was very scary, and it still is. You know, I've never worked in a hotel. I don't even get out very much, so I can't even say I've had many great hotel experiences. But we knew what we wanted to achieve, and we knew that it was very much a restaurant with rooms rather than a hotel with a restaurant. So the rooms are always going to be an extension of the restaurant, and the guests at the hotel we knew would be our St. Peter guests. So that was very much our guiding star in terms of how we did things. Our hotel manager is, he is a very experienced restaurant professional. We first met him at Est, and then we all went off and did other things. Then he ran Charcoal Fish for us. So it's a hotel with a restaurant genetics.
Yeah. St. Peter is very different to the small version that you had on Oxford Street. Tell us about the changes there and the evolution of the restaurant itself.
So firstly, I think that if we hadn't done, so while we were waiting we sort of got big, staff heavy in the lead up to opening the Grand National because we knew it was opening. So we ended up with 2 head chefs, 2 restaurant managers, and we had Fish Butchery Waterloo ready to go. And then, of course, it was delayed. And when it became clear that the Grand National was going to be delayed, we opened Peterman, and that was, obviously it's closed now, but it was the best learning experience for us, which really gave us, the Grand National was our easiest opening, which is crazy to say because it's by far the biggest, by far the most, elevated. But by doing Peterman, we were able to learn a lot of mistakes the hard way and get them out of the way. So I think if we hadn't done that, it would have been a massive jump to go from St. Peter on Oxford Street, which was literally a single bar with 18 stools, to the Grand National, which has a bar, PDR, 40-seat dining room, chef's table, accommodation. It would have been too big a jump.
You mentioned Peterman, which you let go of fairly recently. Was that a hard decision and difficult sort of period for you guys?
Well, it was an easy decision because it wasn't profitable. So I think that when you get to a point when you're happy to say goodbye to a business that you've worked really hard on, that makes it easy. So we always try and make these decisions before it's out of our control. So by closing the business when you can see the writings on the wall, it means that you still have enough money in the bank to pay all the suppliers, relocate the staff, do it all nicely without involving, I don't actually understand the term liquidation or administrators, and I hope I never have to know what that process entails. So we were, by closing, the various businesses that we've closed over the years, when we did, it was all within our control, which it makes it easy, and you're happy to say goodbye because so much good has come from the business, maybe not financially, but so much good that it's fine.
Well, I want to explore all of the different businesses that you have and what's to come as well. You've got all sorts of things going on down the pipeline as well. But you had an absolutely stellar career before teaming up with Josh to create the whole St. Peter world in the world of chefing. Take us back to when you were young. What was sort of role did food play for you as a kid?
So I am the second child of 5 and always loved cooking, and my mum didn't love cooking but was very encouraging of me. She used to buy the ingredients for various things like a lasagna or a chocolate caramel slice, and she'd just leave them on the bench and say, I was thinking about making chocolate caramel slice, but I don't know, it's a bit hard. And then I'd go, I'll do it, Mum. And so I was very encouraged to cook from a really young age. I made all of my siblings' birthday cakes. I remember I did a croquembouche for my elder sister's 18th.
Wow.
Pirate chest cake for my little brother. So mainly baking, but cooking in general. I remember I did this 3-course feast with my little brother. I, got him to help me. When I got Matt Moran's book, I must have been 15, and we cooked 3 courses out of that, and I got everyone to sit down and I wrote a menu. So it's always been something I've loved.
When did you take your sort of first steps into hospitality and think of it as a potential career?
I can't exactly remember. I think it was probably doing hospitality at school. I did food tech and hospitality for my HSC, and I think it became clear to most of my class that I would be a chef and that I loved it. And it was sort of that just acknowledged thing. Julie's obsessed with this and she's going to be a chef. I was probably, to my knowledge, I think I was the only one in my year that wasn't planning to go to uni, which is pretty crazy to say. But yeah, it was just everyone knew I wanted to be a chef. I was obsessed.
Your apprenticeship included some pretty incredible restaurants of their time. Take us through that period. Do you have any stories of what your apprenticeship was like and the influences and the people you worked with?
Yeah, so I started my apprenticeship at Aqua Dining, which is, so I grew up on the Upper North Shore of Sydney, and Aqua Dining is about as far towards the city you can go without crossing the bridge. So I think, maybe I wasn't allowed to move to the city just yet, but I went, to the base of the Harbour Bridge. So my parents were very supportive of me, and they rented me an apartment literally next door to Luna Park, next door to Aqua Dining. And just so I didn't have to do that late night commute. This was back in the day before, overtime. So we were all doing 90-hour weeks quite happily. So I loved that. That was a really happy year for me. It was a great place to work. I did larder there and a bit of pastry. And after a year there, by that time I'd met Josh, and I think I was ready for something a bit more hardcore. So I probably swung too far and then worked at Baccass, which is about as hardcore as you can get. Again, a really happy time. I only lasted 3 months there because the hours were insane. We would be finishing at 3 a.m. Josh would be waiting out the front for me, and starting again at 8, like crazy hours. But a very happy place, really nice people. I did larder there. They used to call me Shuck Face because I was so good at shucking oysters. I think that was an term of endearment. From my time at Aqua Dining, we sold a lot of oysters there. So that was good, but I was exhausted by the end of the 3 months and I left there. But then I think I went to work at Mark as the pastry chef there. I was there for nearly 2 years and I loved that period too. Mark was such a good person to work for. It was such a good kitchen. I had my own kitchen. The pastry kitchen was across the hallway, so I had my very own room all to myself, which suited me quite well. I worked with Parsi, who was the head chef there, and it was just such a creative, happy place to work. Parsi has since told me, because I said to him when I saw him at an awards night last year, I said, "Oh, it was so great the way you were always, inspiring me and giving me something new to work on." And he told me that's actually his trick for staff retention. If you get someone, you can't quit your job if you're thinking about how am I going to pull off what Parsi wants me to cook next week. So every week we'd do Friday lunch, which would be a new set menu. And I'd be thinking up and working towards, on top of my normal prep list, something crazy and creative for that lunch. And that was a really great technique. Yeah.
What did you learn from your time working with Mark Bess and Passy?
Oh, it was, I learned a lot of pastry skills. I was making bread and all the desserts, but also just a different way to think about things, think outside the box. Was very encouraged. They would often come to you with a problem, but not the solution. How can we make a cake that tastes like licorice? Or how can we make a banana cake ice cream? And leave you with that, which is enough, for a young chef to run with. So I remember one dessert I did. Keep in mind, this was 12 years ago, but I thought it was pretty cool at the time. I did a banana cake ice cream and I put it in a spuma and then I piped it into a cake tin and set it in the blast freezer. And then I spray painted it with the chocolate spray gun, dark brown. So when you sliced it, it looked like an aerated browned chocolate cake, banana cake. So that was pretty cool. Things like that just was on top of your workload and just something fun to always be thinking about.
You spent different periods of your career at Rockpool, one time in the kitchen and the other time on the floor. Tell us about sort of that move and why you made the move to the front of house and what you took from it.
Well, I mostly worked at Rockpool in the kitchen on, I can't believe it, but I was offered a job on pastry, but at the time I thought, the hot kitchen was way cooler. So I took the job on larder, which was a mistake because otherwise I would know how to make the date tart. But so I worked on larder for a couple of years, which I loved, with Mike McInerney and also with Phil. And then I ended up on the floor there. That was really just a stopgap job while we were getting married, planning to go overseas to work at the Fat Duck. At the time, I was thinking I didn't want to be a chef anymore and I was going to do a teaching degree after we got married and Josh was going to do the Fat Duck by himself. But I ended up changing my mind on that. So I did 3 months on the floor there, which was a great experience. I was a terrible waitress. So I now know that I won't be attempting that again. I think I dropped 3 souffles in my 3 months. And tears every time and too quietly spoken and shy on the floor. But I did enjoy it.
Yeah, you mentioned the Fat Duck. You spent a bit of time in the UK at various venues. Take us back to that period of time. What was that adventure like?
So Josh had applied maybe 2 years prior to our wedding to do a stage at the Fat Duck and never heard back. And he got the call up to come and it coincided with being right after our wedding. So at first he was going to go by himself and I was going to start my teaching degree. And then I just ended up thinking that's silly, you know, go and have this adventure and maybe I do want to be a chef. So I wouldn't have dared to ask the Fat Duck also for a stage because in my mind it took 2 years for them to approve Josh. I don't know if that was just a slow administration system or what, because they seemed quite happy to have the stages once we were there. So Luke Mangan kindly organised me a stage at the Waterside Inn, which is also it's next to the Fat Duck, which is pretty cool. There's this tiny little village and it's got these 2-3 Michelin star restaurants. So that was always the plan. So Josh did 2 months at the Fat Duck and I was going to do 2 months at the Waterside. So we got over there. We had the most amazing meal at the Waterside Inn. There's, you know, swans landing on the river in front of you and the food is just beautiful. They looked after us so well. And I started my work experience there the next day. It was good, but it wasn't a very easy environment for me to work in. It was all men in the kitchen and they were speaking exclusively French. So I literally couldn't communicate with them. Again, very, very long hours. So I lasted 4 days and the guys at the Fat Duck said, come work with us. We need a pastry stage. And I said, fantastic. So I did 2 months on pastry at the Fat Duck while Josh was in the development kitchen. And so I was doing service every night. They were very, you know, happy to let me plate up desserts and prep during the day. I did some time in the chocolate room making the white chocolate, jam, shortbread playing cards they were doing at the time. And that was a really lovely place to work. They were really good people.
When you were there, that period of time, the Fat Duck was sort of huge around the globe. What did you take from the experiences you had in that kitchen?
Similar to Mark, I would say it just gave you that different framework of thinking about different ways to do things and different ways to cook things. Just very basic things like making a jam, but they would then make the jam and then put it in a Paco container, freeze it and pacotize it. So then all of a sudden you have this very fine whipped pectin jam, which is absolutely delicious. There's no seeds in it. It's got a totally different texture. Just small things like that, different ways to think about how you can make something taste more delicious or do it in a better way. And also we met a whole lot of great people who, are now spread across the globe, but we still keep in touch with from that time because there was such a welcoming community. I remember one of the chefs there, his name was Otto. He took us out to play tennis one day, which he didn't need to do. You know, it was his day off and it's just really, they were a great group of people.
Through this conversation, you sort of been mentioning this sort of wanting to leave the industry and teach, but being pulled back in because of opportunity and sort of that balance. I know you went on to do teaching later on, but you also worked at some great restaurants after your time in the UK. Tell us about that sort of trying to get that balance of you wanting to teach but being pulled back into the industry. How have you managed that?
Well, I think the teaching was more me knowing that I wanted to have a family and trying to think about how I could combine cooking with that, and being a hospitality or food tech teacher seemed quite logical. So that was that, but also, still very much wanting to be a chef. So I did do my teaching degree. So when we returned to Australia, I worked in a few different places and I was at Est as the pastry chef there. When I got pregnant with our first child, Ted, it was very difficult to work pregnant. I don't know how people do it. I lasted until I was 25 weeks and I couldn't do it anymore. Pretty early on into the pregnancy, I went down to 3 days a week. The funny thing is that was still 38 hours, so I still got my full time. And I was, they were finding me asleep in the PDR and the fire escape, and I was exhausted. So after we had our first child, Ted, he was a pretty easy baby, and so I thought now would be a good time to do my degree. So I signed up to do it online, and I enjoyed the degree and I enjoyed the work experience that I did. And I probably would have kept teaching if it wasn't for the fact that during the time that I was doing the degree, we also opened St. Peter and Fish Butchery. So by the time I was doing my first year of teaching, I was also running St. Peter and Fish Butchery. So it was, I was going to work doing, a couple. I was doing half a week teaching and compromising on what I was doing for the business. And as restaurants, a mistake for a restaurant in terms of, missing paying a bill or, not checking prices from a supplier, they can be very expensive. So it wasn't making sense for me not to do that job well so that I could do the teaching. So I decided to focus on the business after a year of teaching.
Was there anything that you've taken from your experiences teaching hospitality into the business and the way you deal with staff?
Well, to be fair, Josh tends to be more hands-on in terms of the staff relationships. So he is really the one who sees them day to day and manages any problems that may come up. The one thing I think I did take from my teaching degree was it had an element of design. So we learned Photoshop and Adobe Illustrator, and that's been invaluable in terms of setting up websites, designing our logos, and doing all of our marketing. Yeah.
Well, I know St. Peter is only sort of fresh and new, and it's a big project for you guys. But take us back to the beginnings of St. Peter and when you and Josh sort of landed on the site. How did you find the site and what was that period like for you guys?
So we had always said we wouldn't open our own business quite clearly. We knew that was a bad idea. And it wasn't until someone said to Josh, I'll open a restaurant for you. You can have a 10% stake. You do the legwork, go and find a site. And so we did, and we looked at lots of different sites, and, so funny. Josh would have made any of them work. We're looking at all these pokey little sites all around the city, and he's like, yep, perfect. Yep, if it's like this, I'll do it this way. Yep, great, I'll take it, give it to me. He was just chomping at the bit to start. But we did like this Paddington site because Josh had been working at Fish Face, so he had that sort of eastern suburbs following already. And it wasn't until the 11th hour that we decided to do the business alone without the business partner. I think it was literally up to signing the lease. So the fact that he was excited to invest in the business, and we started thinking, oh, well, maybe we should, go all in. And my dad said to me, he said, how much money, will you need to set it up? And, so they actually loaned us the money to do the fit out, which we paid them back in the first year. I'm very proud to say. Yeah. So, and then once you start, you can't stop, can you? So you find a lease, your name's on it, you've spent the money, you've got to keep going.
Tell us about the working relationship. How do you guys decide on sort of the direction that you take the company and the new sort of restaurants and sort of what direction to go? What's the planning like for you guys?
Just lots of conversations around the kitchen bench and at home. We tend to agree in general, which may be just that Josh tends to agree with me. The smart guy. Yeah, but also I think I tend to handle the micro, and Josh is more of a big picture kind of person, which works really well. So, we'll get the KPIs on a Wednesday and I'll call him up panicked and he'll be like, don't worry, we've got this happening. This is about to, this bit of media is about to come out. And he's, and that's like this because of that, and that's fine. And so he's very calm and big picture, and I'm the person who worries about the I often talk to him about small money and big money, which is not a very financial term, but I find it really hard when restaurants deal with huge amounts of revenue but keep very little of them. So it's sort of, you're at the supermarket choosing, which is the best value, whatever to buy for the family. And at the same time, you're paying an electricity bill for $15,000, and it blows my mind, and I find it very hard to make sense of. But that's why I roll. So I sort of deal with the small details.
You guys have a fascinating project in Hamilton Island soon. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that. So that's opening in around Easter time. So the Hamilton Island office, Hamilton Island is owned by one family, and their office happens to be down the road from Peterman. So for all Peterman's failings, it introduced us to this wonderful group of people, and they loved Peterman. So that was how that relationship was born. They loved the restaurant and said to us, we're opening this hotel. It's the first sort of big development I think they've done, to my knowledge, in a decade since Qualia. So they're opening a brand new hotel on Hamilton Island. It's very cool, very luxe, family friendly, but also it's not a kids resort, it's just a beautiful place to be. Family friendly in the sense that Qualia is no children. So this is for everyone, but they've done such a beautiful job. So they asked us to consult on the restaurant there for them, and we've really enjoyed that process. It's really nice having someone else to bounce ideas off, and an actual team of people. Normally, for example, I've designed all our websites and logos and uniforms, but instead, I'll do something and draw it up, and whereas in our business that would be where it would stop, then they've got this design team who can make it that much better. So I've really enjoyed that point of view of having some people to talk to and a great team to work with. So it's going to be, and I'm really excited about it because it's the kind of food I like to eat. So I don't think the menu has been released yet, but I've seen it obviously, and it sounds delicious. I'm excited about that.
You guys have 4 kids, incredibly busy. You mentioned about the challenges when you were pregnant with your first child and that shift that you felt you should do. How do you manage such a large family and so many businesses and being so successful with them as well? How do you strike that balance?
It's very difficult. We take an approach of divide and conquer with most things. I often say there's nothing that I know that Josh knows, and vice versa. So, he won't know really about the life admin or that sort of aspect of things, but on the same page, I don't know about really much of the work he does in terms of the minutiae of the menu planning, staff movements. So we divide and conquer, and it is flexible for me. I work from home. I can work whenever I want. I'm usually working late at night after the kids go to bed, and that works really well for us because it means I can still do all the school stuff, go to anything at the school that I want to go to, and that's great, and not a position that a lot of people are in who are working.
You guys have made an incredible success, and it's not just the success of the venues, but it's the change and the impact that you've had on the dining landscape in this country and also globally, and the attention on seafood and the way that's delivered in a restaurant setting. What sort of advice would you have for young operators that might be looking to go out and make their sort of stamp on the world and with their own things? Like, you guys are in amongst it at the moment. What advice would you have for them?
I think find a niche or find a focus, because the media needs something to write about and something to talk about. So if you're trying to be everything for everyone, then you'll just fall into that basket of where should we go? We could go to a number of these places. Whereas if you have a focus, then you can really stand out in that category. And also, I think just try to do everything right and by the book and nicely, even if it's more expensive way to do things. So Josh and I, we've just always wanted to be able to sleep at night, and, you know, we've done everything the right way as best we can. So I think that that's important too, and people can see that and appreciate that we're nice people and we're not yelling at staff and we're not, stitching anyone up.
Well, you guys continue to have an extraordinary influence on Australia's dining landscape, but what do you love about what you do?
Oh, I'm very proud of what we've achieved, and I really love going into the restaurant and seeing all the staff. It's a wonderful job for them that's going to be a memory for them, and, hopefully. And I enjoy that aspect of it. I'm not there during service, so I think I miss probably the happiest time of the restaurant, which is, the whole goal of a restaurant is to feed people and make them happy and create those experiences. So I actually rarely see that side of things. But, yeah, I enjoy it as much as I can, and, yeah.
Well, Julie, I can't wait to see what you guys do in Hamilton Island, and no doubt there'll be something else in the pipeline beyond that as well. It's been an absolute honour to have you on Deep in the Weeds today. Please keep in touch and we'll catch up again soon.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we take a deep dive into the lives of the incredible people who ply their trade in the food and hospitality sector. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast, or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.